You know, when you think of epic battle names, you think of Stalingrad or Gettysburg or Thermopylae. You probably don't think of the Battle of the Herrings. I mean, it sounds less like a historic clash of armies and more like a messy argument at a seafood market, right? But believe it or not, this bizarrely named fight is one of the most important little footnotes in all of history.
And that really is the million-dollar question, isn't it? How could a simple shipment of fish completely alter the path of a war? Because this story isn't just about soldiers and strategy, it's about how a totally mundane supply run led to an absolutely crushing defeat that somehow, against all odds, ended up saving a nation. So let's talk about these herrings. Were they a code name, a secret weapon? No, they were literally barrels and barrels of salted fish. See, it's early 1429, and the English army needs supplies, so they send this huge convoy, about 300 wagons packed with weapons, ammo, and because the religious season of Lent was coming up, a ton of herring. You couldn't eat meat, so fish was the next best thing. Seemed like a totally normal, boring delivery. Or so everyone thought. Now, to get why this fish delivery was such a big deal, you have to understand just how bad things were for France at this point. This is deep into the 100 Years' War, and frankly, France is on life support. The kingdom is literally on its knees.
Everything hinged on the city of Orléans. It was the key to the whole country. And by 1429, the English had it completely surrounded and had been choking it out for months. The people inside were starving, morale was just gone. If Orléans fell, that was probably it for France. So stopping this English supply convoy wasn't just a goal, it was one of their last desperate hopes.
And just look at the numbers here. On one side, you have the French and their Scottish allies with somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000 troops. On the other, you have the English convoy guard, led by a guy named Sir John Fastolf, with maybe 1,600 men. This should have been a slam dunk for the French. They had them outnumbered more than 2 to 1. But, as you know, battles are never fought on paper. What happens next is this incredible mix of brilliant strategy running headfirst into a catastrophic, history-changing blunder. So, the English commander, Sir John Fastolf, knows he's in a tough spot, outnumbered, out in the open. So he pulls out a genius move. He creates what's called a wagon fort. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's the medieval version of circling the wagons, turning your biggest weakness, a slow, clunky supply train, into an instant fortress. He gets his men to arrange all 300 wagons into a big defensive box. Then, they pound sharpened wooden stakes into the ground all around it, a nasty little trick to shred any charging horses. And inside this makeshift fort, he puts his deadliest weapon, his famous English longbowmen and crossbowmen, just waiting to let loose. The French, though, they've got a plan too, a modern plan. They've brought along some of the newest tech on the battlefield, gunpowder artillery, cannons. The idea was solid. Why charge headfirst into a fortress? Just stand back, out of arrow range, and blast it to bits. It really should have worked. But then, it all went wrong. The French commander told his army to hold their position and let the cannons do the work. But a unit of Scottish infantry just got impatient. They couldn't stand waiting. Against direct orders, they just went for it. They charged. And in that single moment, the entire French plan disintegrated. The cannons had to stop firing, because you can't shoot at the enemy when your own guys are in the way. The charging Scots ran straight into that wall of wooden stakes and a storm of English arrows. They were just torn apart. The French cavalry tried to ride in to save them and got the exact same treatment. It was chaos. Fastolf sees this absolute mess unfolding and realizes this is his chance. He gives the order, and his men pour out from behind the safety of the wagons. They slam into the disorganized, confused enemy from the sides, and the battle turns into a total slaughter. The much larger French and Scottish army completely broke and ran. So, the English convoy and all its fish rolled on to Orléans. Mission successful. But for the French, the news of this defeat was absolutely catastrophic. It felt like the final nail in the coffin. They lost around 400 men, a huge number back then, and that included their commander on the field, Sir John Stewart of Darnley. This wasn't just a loss, it was a humiliation. It was a psychological gut punch. And the fallout was immediate. One of their best commanders was wounded. The overall leader, the Count of Clermont, got blamed for the whole thing and was branded a coward, even though he tried to stop the stupid charge. Back in Orléans, any glimmer of hope was just extinguished. The city leaders started seriously talking about surrender. It really seemed like it was all over for France.
And this right here, at the lowest of the low, is where the story takes a turn so wild you'd think it was made up for a movie. A story that started with fish and ended in total disaster was about to become something else entirely. It was about to become a prophecy fulfilled.
So you have to be asking yourself, how on earth could this embarrassing, spirit-crushing defeat possibly be a good thing for France? Well, it's because this failure, on this exact day, was the thing that would launch the career of one of the most famous people in world history.
Get this. On the exact same day as the Battle of the Herrings, February 12th, miles away in a town called Vaucouleurs, a teenage peasant girl is trying to convince a local captain to send her to the French court. And she tells him, right then and there, that the French army has just suffered a terrible loss near Orléans. A few days later, a messenger arrives exhausted, carrying the news of the shocking defeat at the Battle of the Herrings. She knew. She had been right.
Of course, that girl was Joan of Arc. The captain, completely stunned and now convinced she was divinely inspired, finally agreed to send her on her way. The humiliating Battle of the Herrings became the very proof she needed. A terrible military blunder was transformed into a sign from God, setting Joan on the path to lift the siege of Orléans and change the course of the entire war.
And that just leaves us with this one incredible thought. A rash, foolish charge by a few hundred soldiers led to a disaster that almost destroyed a kingdom. But did that same tactical blunder, happening on that exact day, provide the very miracle needed to convince a skeptical world to believe in a teenage girl who would go on to save her country? History is it's stranger than fiction.